Aido, which is my best Estonian for hello. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. I work for an organization called the Center for Public Impact, and we're a not-for-profit foundation that works with governments around the world to improve their effectiveness and their outcomes that they're achieving for citizens. So the question I'd like to speak briefly with you about today is how can government make the best use of AI and related technologies to improve the outcomes for citizens? That's something we're certainly concerned with at the Centre for Public Impact, and it's something from speaking to many of you today, I know you're thinking about today in your different governments and different roles around the world. And we've already heard some excellent ideas from this platform this morning. Greg outlined 4 areas, if you recall, 4 enablers for AI that apply equally to government as they do to the rest of society. He said that the rise of data, the rise of computing power, the rise of tools, and the importance of human ingenuity and creativity were all important if we want to unlock the potential that AI has to offer for our societies. And all of these are absolutely true. But I'd like to suggest that there's a 5th dimension that's particularly important in government, and we've already heard Miguel and other speakers talk about it. And in fact, Prime Minister Ratas said this morning, this point in his speech, we need to focus on trust, public support, what we at Centre for Public Impact called legitimacy, the reservoir of public support, not just for AI, but it applies to all policy-making processes, is what government relies on in order to achieve what it can achieve for citizens. And in AI, it's particularly important for the reasons that also we've already heard about. So whereas if my Spotify algorithm is recommending a tune to me that I don't like, that's a fairly low-risk event. When government starts applying AI to public services, it's your health, it's your children's education, it's your welfare payments, and as Miguel just pointed out, it could even be your liberty that's at stake. So trust, public support, legitimacy matter a great deal for AI. And I'd like to offer some 5 actions, 5 practical recommendations based on the research that we've been doing at CPI about how governments can improve legitimacy as they're thinking about deploying some of these technologies. And I'll use the example of food safety as an example just to walk this through. So all governments around the world have some sort of function, whether it's at city level or a regional level, of inspecting restaurants to check they're applying to local hygiene and food safety standards. And this is obviously a public benefit. It means that we don't get sick, and we can rely on the fact that, that restaurants are following the rules when they're preparing and serving our food. And this is also an area where AI could indeed help. And in fact, there are many governments around the world who are actually looking at AI applications in this space because it's an area that's got plenty of data on the pass scores and the inspections related to all of these restaurants, but also related to where they are located, the types of cuisine they're serving, all can be put into an AI. And also we could see a benefit of how that could work with the officials, let's say the inspectors who are going out to restaurants and visiting. So this could be an area where AI could actually help to improve outcomes for citizens. So what are some of the things we could think about as we're starting to go down that path, if that's something we wanted to do that would improve trust, strengthen legitimacy as we go, rather than risk undermining it? 5 things. Number 1, we need to empathize with the real needs of end users and build objectives around them. So this is obvious also in the broader digital context, but we're not about trying to bring AI. Let's see if we can find a place where we can plug AI into something. If we start with that objective, that will not help at all. We need to be thinking about what are the objectives that we're wanting to achieve in this particular space. So in this particular space, the end users actually might be the food inspectors themselves, and speaking to them and involving them in the decision-making about which objectives should we be maximizing for. Is it that we need to increase the detection rate of restaurants? Is it that we want to do it earlier? Is it that there's a particular category of restaurant or a particular category of failure that we want to try and identify? As we've already heard from on this stage, if we get the objective even slightly wrong with AI, then that does risk undermining the whole process. So speaking to the people who are going to be using it and really understanding how they could use tools related to AI in their jobs is fundamentally important. Number 2, focus on specific and doable tasks. If we're talking about AI in general, and we're asking people, do you trust AI? That's a very hard question to to answer. But when we say, do you believe that we can use AI in this specific situation to improve services in this specific way? It's a much more tangible, real conversation. Of course, as we start to develop this around specific tasks, it gives us experience and stories that we can start to tell and share to engage the wider public in a conversation about how these tools are being used. And if we're talking about the food inspectors here, if we're focusing on specific tasks rather than robots replacing food inspectors, then that's also a way of having an engaged and meaningful conversation with them. Perhaps in their job, the role of detection might be something which we can automate, which will free them up, as we've heard from other panelists, free them up for other tasks rather than replacing them. So this would free them up maybe for prevention activity as a food inspector. That might make their jobs more enjoyable. And so by focusing on the tasks rather than the job, we can have a more meaningful and productive conversation about how these technologies can work. Thirdly, build AI literacy into the organization and the public. So this is about, rather than relying on the technologists arriving and then telling the food inspectors, here, we've got a solution for you, it's about building that basic AI literacy into the professions who are already working with citizens, amongst the citizens themselves, about what the potential for these technologies are, so that they can start thinking, as they're doing their jobs, how are some ways that potentially these technologies and tools could help me, and the solutions being generated by them potentially are the ideas for solutions rather than coming from the outside. So we're not expecting everyone to become a coder or to know the intricacies of AI, but if we can start to build that basic literacy, we think that will make a massive difference to the quality of the conversations we're having within government, within public services about how AI can help. Fourthly, keep maintaining and improving AI systems. So again, it's probably an obvious point, but this isn't just about getting the technology out there and deploying it once. Data changes. Expectations change. Indeed, if we imagine in the food inspector's situation, the deployment of this tool into their jobs will actually change their jobs. So we need to be constantly looking how the situation is evolving, and evolving the tool, maybe changing the algorithm, changing the way that we're using it to optimize all the time. This isn't something we can just do once and then expect it to work forevermore. And then finally, design for and embrace extended scrutiny. Again, this is a point that other speakers have made, but I'd like to underline it. The extent to which we can do this in the open, to which we can encourage peer review, peer scrutiny, the extent to which one country or one city that's tried this can be open and share that information about the tools, the applications, what's worked, what's not worked with other cities will help us all learn and help us improve, strengthen, identify risks, and address them as we're going along. So those are the 5 actions which we at CPI think, when you're thinking about deploying AI tools in government, if you follow these, you're more likely to end up with better trust, better public support, stronger legitimacy, which is likely to lead to greater success in the long run. And we've published a report, which many of you have already picked up copies of. I think we've got it available here today from our stand. Thank you very much.